Hello guys, and welcome to my Stamina Dragon Knight blind build. This is not a blind DK that can't see. This is a DK that, as you can see here, causes your opponents to become blinded. And you see here we are using the blind to effectively stop the dot damage from killing us. So very, very cool. So what does this build do? Well, this build has some really cool defensive gameplay techniques using really strong blinds as well as the really powerful reflect that DKs get to give you a very strong defensive kit. And it's also got a pretty powerful offensive kit as well, and you can dump alts on it like crazy. This is quite a powerful alt generation DK. So let's take a look at the build, guys. As you can see, the burst is pretty sweet on this build, proccing the blind yet again on that Templar. Gotta love it, gotta love it. So this is, yeah, a medium armor Dragon Knight as well. We're doing 511 in the medium armor, so you're pretty mobile on this build too. It's got pretty good sustain, and it's got a lot of fighting power, So let's take a look at the build, guys. Let's jump right into it. Let's take a look at the stat page to begin. Not actually that impressive on the stat page. We'll buff up real fast for you guys so you can see the fully buffed stats on this build. And I think that's it right there. So we've got the armor up. There we go. The weapon damage. Perfect. So we're coming in at 3,283 weapon damage, not including our infused bow proc, 43% weapon crit, 30.5k stam, 25k health, 11.5k magicka. These are not the highest max stats that I've played for sure. These are actually not super high offensive stats at all. But this build still does hit pretty hard, and we'll get into why it does in a minute. We have our physical and spell resist coming in at quite impressive values, almost 2.7k spell, 2.3k physical resist, and just under 2k critical resistance. Because our physical spell resist is so high, the crit resist isn't super huge, but sitting around that 2k mark is recommended for, well, just any PvP build in general. If we take a look at our regens, you saw when we had the buff up, we had about 1,600 stam recovery, 350 health, and 700 magicka recovery. Okay, so let's take a look at the effects that we have on here. We've got the warrior for the bonus weapon damage, very important. Now this is something you could also switch for the Serpent Mundus if you want more stam recovery on this spec, but due to the fact that our offensive potential is already a little bit on the low side, I would recommend sticking with the warrior Mundus. And we are a werewolf, but that's not important for the build. My DK is just a werewolf. We have Minor Berserk from wearing a two-piece of Slime Cross. So there is part of why we're going to hit harder than our underwhelming stats would suggest. We do have Slime Cross, so we do have Minor Berserk on this build as well for that 8% bonus damage. And then finally, for the food, we're using a Dubious Camoran Throne. So for the consumables on this build, guys, I use Alliance Battle Droughts, which are going to restore some stam and give you the weapon damage you need. Ideally, you want to use the weapon damage and weapon crit pots. Let's just see if I have some somewhere here. Here we go. Essence of Weapon Power. So this is going to give you Major Brutality, Major Savagery, and restore your stamina. These are two buffs that this build does not have due to it being bow, sword, and board. So we have the Major Brutality coming from the pots here, and the Major Savagery as well. And like I said, guys, I'm using the Alliance Battle Drought simply because they're a really cheap alternative to the weapon damage potions that we were looking at here. Okay, so let's take a look at those sets. So this is why we're going to have those apparently underwhelming stats. So first of all, we've got the two-piece Slime Craw as mentioned before. Minor Berserk increasing our damage by 8%. Very, very good. The next set that we have is a 5-piece Tabas Favor. So this is how we're going to get a lot of alt gen on this build. It's also going to give us a bit of max health, stam, and mag recovery. So that's why we're sitting at that 25k health mark on a medium armor build with nothing in health. So there we go. So the 5 Tabas Favor we have on both swaps. We never lose it. And finally, on the Sword and Board swap only, we have a 5-piece Blessed set. And what this set does is it gives you a 33% chance to blind your attacker if you block an attack, causing him to miss all their attacks for 5 seconds on a 10-second cooldown. And the 2, 3, 4 pieces here are going to give us a bit of sustain and bulk up our resistances, and that's why our physical spell resist is so high on this build as well. Now, this is a really good set. Now, the first question you guys are going to ask is, hey, doesn't that work with Tabas? And that's what I had originally thought when I put this build together, that the blind would work with Tabas, but it actually doesn't, because a miss is not a dodged attack, so you cannot use this set to proc Tabas' favor. That being said, this is still such a good set for PvP. It gives you essentially the ability to completely shut down a single opponent when they jump on top of you, which is incredibly useful. This is probably the hardest counter to a melee Nightblade gank that I can think of in the game. You just hold block and you effectively shut them down for 5 seconds. It is so effective at countering any melee opponent that jumps on top of you, and it really helps you even the odds in something like a 2v1, etc. So there you have it. We are running the Blessed set here, and I wish it would have worked with Tabas' favor. That would have given us an absolutely insane amount of alt gen on this build. However, it doesn't, unfortunately, but it's still a really good set. So something that I'm going to say here is that I had considered using other sets once I'd come to find out that the Blessed set doesn't proc Tabas, because I was under the impression that it proc Tabas for a little bit while I was playing this build. And there are other set options you can use here, Witchman's being a good one, Werewolf Hide being a good one as well, both alt-generating sets. You could even use a more offensive set like Hunting's Rage if you wanted to up the damage, but you know, for me, it really came down to the fact that this set is just so good and so useful on the DK for more than one reason. And I got to continue to rave about this set because it's so powerful. One of the biggest weaknesses that a Dragon Knight has is if you hit it with a lot of damage over time effects, hit it with a heal debuff, and then the Dragon Knight's in a tough spot, especially a Stam DK. They're not going to purge it, they're going to have to deal with these dots, and they're just going to have to last it out. Well, you could actually use the Blessed set to shut down all incoming damage from one player. I'm talking if they have dots on you and you block the dots, then they will start missing you once you proc Blessed. You can use the Blessed set to block a Soul Assault, and the Soul Assault will start missing you and do no damage to you. It is such a powerful set, and it is so great when you use it at the right moments in PvP as a defensive and even an offensive utility for your build. So there you have it, guys. Absolutely fantastic set. Let's continue to take a look at the gear here. So we're going to take a look at just the armor we're wearing. We've got 5 pieces of medium armor on and 1 piece of heavy. The trait distribution, we have 4 well fitted, as you can see on these pieces here. We've got 1 impen, 1 sturdy, and 1 divines. Divines is just the trait I had on this helm. I would recommend going with either 1 impen or 1 sturdy, whatever you feel like you want to use more. On the weapons, we have the Blessed Sword Nirnhoned. Very important to go for Nirnhoned, I think, in PvP. It is the best in slot for PvP for healing and damage. And then we've got a Tabas Favor Shield and a Tabas Bow. The shield is sturdy to help that block gameplay. We're of course going to use that block to proc the blind, so it's very important that we have the sturdy shield. And then, of course, we've got the Bow of Tabas Favor. This is infused with the increased weapon spell damage enchant. So this brings up the weapon damage on this build to around 3,900 fully buffed, which isn't super terrible. For Sword and Board, it's not bad. Or if we were running dual wields, we'd be sitting in the nature of around 4,300 weapon damage. So it's pretty decent, I think, for Sword and Board. It's not the best damage, but like I said, this is a playstyle build. This is all about playing the medium armor to its full extent, taking advantage of those blinds, roll dodges, and reflects. So for the enchant on the sword, we went with a disease enchant. For the enchants on the gear, guys, we have full weapon damage enchants for our rings and necklaces. Notice how we have 2 healthy rings and a robust necklace. The Blessed set actually comes with a robust necklace. It's a special drop. I'm not sure where it drops, but you can buy it from players on the guild stores. So there you have it. You can get at least the robust necklace. And then finally, we have the last piece of Blessed in our heavy armor piece here for the 511 medium. The enchants on the gear, guys, I've gone with all max stam. You can go for the tri-stat Hacky Joes here. I actually think the tri-stats would be really good. But like I said, this build is a little bit lacking on the offensive end, so playing more heavy on the max stam is going to be a little bit more beneficial, I think, just due to the fact that you'll be hitting a little bit harder. Okay, so let's take a look at the skills we're using. On the first bar, ladies and gentlemen, we have our Sword and Board bar. The first ability we have is Heroic Slash. You can guess why this is here. Number one, we're going to deal some damage with this ability, which is great. Number two, it's going to give us Minor Heroism, giving you one ultimate every 1.5 seconds for 9 seconds. So very good ability to help keep that ult uptime. This is an ult generation build, so Heroic Slash fits right into that. It's also going to throw Minor Maim on the target, reducing their damage by 15%. Also fantastic if you're getting ganked, you can throw a quick Heroic Slash, or if you just don't want to take some extra damage from a more offensive target, just Heroic Slash them and it will decrease the damage they do. It also puts a snare on the target. So it's a really good spammable, I think, for Sword and Board. For this build, it's just the best spammable, I think, that makes sense for the alt gen and the outgoing damage. The next ability we have is Venomous Claw. Now this ability here is kind of up to you which one you want to run. Venomous Claw I really like because it deals a ton of damage over time to a single target, and it's very, very cheap. Your other option here would be Noxious Breath, which is going to deal similar amounts of outgoing damage, not quite as much, but it's also going to afflict the target with Major Fracture, reducing their physical resistance. So it's kind of up to you which one you want to go for here. I chose the greater damage single target dot because that kind of fit my playstyle more, but the AoE is quite strong as well, and it has a bit of distance on it, so you can get people that are a little further away from you with it as well. The next ability we have is Molten Armaments. Now this is kind of a weird choice for a Stam DK, I know. Increase the damage with your own fully charged heavy attacks by 40%. That's what we're going after here on this build, that increased heavy attack damage. So that's why we've got this here. This is a very, like I said, a very situationally tanky build, and if you play it right, you can be very hard to attack and very hard to hurt on this build, and especially if you use your blind right, it allows you to set up very strong heavy attacks on a player, and all they can do is try to avoid them because they're blinded. They're not going to interrupt your heavy attacks here. So that's why we're running this ability here, just because we have such a tight defensive kit, and it works really well in a one-on-one. It's really easy to get a lot of heavy attacks off on this build, and they hit quite hard. Not only that, but your heavy attacks are going to be important for those heavier burst combos, especially using your Dragon Leap. This is also kind of a nice ability because it'll return a little bit of stam, being an Earthern Heart ability when you use it. Not a huge amount, though. The next ability we have is our mainstay heal for the build. This is Resolving Vigor. We've got a pretty decent tooltip coming in here at around 1300, so not bad at all, especially considering that we don't have access to any bonus healing, or we don't have any bonus healing stuff on this build. We're not running the Draconic Power, the Earthern Heart Obsidian Shield for Major Mending. So 14k tooltip buffed, not a bad Vigor at all. It's not super great, but it's not terrible. It's kind of in that middle line. And because this build is a little bit tankier and it has that great defensive utility, I think this Vigor is appropriate for the spec that we're playing. The next ability we have is Hardened Armor. Now, Hardened Armor is you're going to be your armor buff, pretty much. It'll increase your physical and spell resist and give you a little bit of a damage shield to give you a little bit of cushion for that incoming burst. It also shoots a spray of spikes around you that damages anyone who's around you. So this is nice for two reasons. Number one, we've got that armor buff, which is important. That's going to equate to around 8% reduced incoming damage in PvP. And then finally, the spikes that it throws out can be used to pull people out of stealth. Kind of a little bit of a weird thing for this skill, but it does come in handy. I have caught Nightblades with this ability, pulled them out of stealth, and then finished them off thanks to this Hardened Armor dot pulling them out of stealth. So there you have it. And then finally, guys, for the last ability on the Sword and Board bar, we have Take Flight. Launch yourself at the enemy, dealing 17k base damage and stunning everyone in the area. Big AoE, undodgeable, big stun. I mean, this is one of my favorite ultimates in the game, 28 meters of range. So, fun fact, this is actually the only gap closer as well that I use on this spec. We've got quite an offensive bow bar, and you guys will see that when we get to it, but this gap closer here is very powerful when you need to use that gap closer on this build, because we don't have access to any other one. But there you have it. Take Flight, very strong ultimate. We are playing an ultimate generation build, and Take Flight is kind of your ultimate of choice for this spec, and it hits hard, ladies and gentlemen. Take Flight does some serious damage, I'm not going to lie. I've hit 13k crits in the CP campaigns on this spec. Now, I know that's not the hugest Take Flight, but I think for a spec that is not fully damage-oriented, 13k is pretty darn good. So Yeah, very powerful ultimate, very powerful ultimate. I've enjoyed using it a lot, and you can dump a take flight once every 20 seconds or so on this spec, maybe even less if you're generating enough ultimate. So it works really well. Okay, so let's check out that bow bar. So we're going to start at the first ability here, Poison Injection. You guys know why this is here. This is going to be our second damage over time ability for the build, the other one being our single target on the sword and board bar. But here you can see it will deal increased damage as the opponent's health begins to drop below 50%, and it deals a lot of bonus damage. So this is kind of how we're going to capitalize kills on this build. We're going to dot them up with Poison Injection, dot them up with Venomous Claw, and of course throw a little Lethal Arrow, and then for the heal debuff, that's what I'm talking about, but we'll get to that ability later. So yeah, that's just part of the dot gameplay on this build. Poison Injection, of course, deals a lot of damage. Something I wanted to mention for this build, if you guys wanted to give it a shot, I'm running the 5 Tava's Favor here on the bow swap, and I've actually got the Tava and the shield. Now, if I had done this and set up so I had the Blessed Rings and Necklace, and then a Blessed Sword, Blessed Shield, and a Blessed Bow instead of Tava's Favor, and kept all the Tava's Favor in my gear here, I could potentially switch out this bow here for a Master's Bow. And the Master's Bow, of course, is going to be nice to increase that weapon damage when you use your Poison Injection to make you hit even harder. But I don't have the Master Bow, and I didn't want to go buy the Blessed Shield and Bow because I didn't have the Master Bow anyway. But it's just a little bit of thought if you guys wanted to maybe switch out something for a little bit better gear that I don't have access to myself. The next ability we have is Lethal Arrow, guys. This is a very important very important skill for this build yet again. Lethal Arrow is not only going to be great for that burst damage, it is also going to be great because it afflicts your opponents with that Major Defile, and it will poison them. That's 2 negative effects that you're throwing on your target with your Lethal Arrow. And that Major Defile, I cannot stress this enough, it is so important for PvP. It has a huge effect in determining whether or not you will beat, especially things like Stamina Wardens and stuff like that. Things that have huge amounts of incoming healing power. Magicka Templar, Stamina Warden, Stamina Templar, anything really that has a huge amount of healing power. Lethal Arrow is really going to stop that. It's going to make it a lot harder for them to get the heals that they need. So that's why we have this ability here. And secondarily, it is a great burst skill. 1 fully charged bow heavy attack into the Lethal Arrow into light attack leap. And it's not a perfect combo because the abilities will land kind of away from each other, but within a 1 to 2 second period from each other. And it deals a lot of damage though. So there you have it. That's kind of a bit of the burst on this build. And Lethal Arrow, of course, I find is just a great move for PvP in general due to that heal debuff. The next ability we have is Draining Shot. This is going to be your secondary heal for this build. Kind of your oh shit or burst heal, I guess you can call it as well. Draining Shot's great. It's going to knock your opponent back, stunning them for 1.5 seconds, and of course healing you after the stun ends for almost 9k health. So quite a powerful heal coming from Draining Shot here. I love this ability because you can engage a group of players and just Draining Shot stun all of them, and you're essentially stunning and healing yourself. You're stunning them and healing yourself at the same time, so it works really, really well. The next ability that we have is Shuffle. There's 2 reasons we're running Shuffle. I know you guys don't normally see me use an ability like Shuffle or just get the major evasion buff in general, but for the Ultimate Generation Dragon Knight build running Tava's Favor, I had to run Shuffle because it's going to help generate Ultimate. First of all. Second of all, it's going to make our block cheaper, making our Blessed set easier to work. How does it make your block cheaper? Well, if someone misses you due to your Shuffle, you don't spend the stam blocking that attack, so it essentially reduces block cost by 15% by activating it. And then finally, each piece of medium armor that I'm wearing will make me immune to snares and immobilizations for 0.5 seconds. So I get 2.5 seconds of snare and immobilization immunity when I pop Shuffle. And that's what we're really going to be using it for defensively here as well, is making sure that we can stay mobile. We're in medium armor, we can sprint quite fast, we have wings, and we have access to a very easy to proc blind. Shuffle is going to be great to keep us mobile and on our feet, and essentially hard to lock down. And then finally, guys, the last ability we have here is Dragonfire Scale. And we're using the Reflect here. Dragonfire Scale, increase the damage of reflected projectiles by 35% against the attacker. Very, very powerful. And of course, it can reflect up to 4 projectiles. And ZeniMax buffed wings a little bit in the recent Clockwork City patch by increasing the duration to 6 seconds from 4 seconds. So it's a really, really good ability. It was good before, but now I think it's even better. That 6-second timer is really really nice. And yeah, something to note about this build is that I only have 701 Magicka recovery, but due to the fact that we can pump out ults so fast and each ult that we dump is pretty much going to fill up our Magicka bar, we can pop a lot of wings on this build. Pretty much maintain a 70 or 8, around a 60 to 70% uptime on our Reflect, which is really, really good, I think. And like I said, mixed in with the blind from your Sword and Board, you can turn your medium armor build into quite the tanky opponent, quite the opponent that can just shut down anyone who attacks them. So it's a really great combination. These Dragonfire Scale Reflect mixed with the block on the Blessed set, I absolutely love it. It allows you to turn yourself into quite the turtle on the DK. And then finally, guys, if there is one turtle ability to rule them all, it has to be Corrosive Armor. This is the last ultimate that we're running, and it's the ultimate we're running on the bow bar, so kind of our off ultimate on this build, I guess you could call it. Absolutely fantastic ultimate. It's going to cap incoming damage at 3% of your max health. So pretty much you won't take near as much damage as you were before. It absolutely cuts the incoming damage you take for this 10.8 seconds. Now the thing is I don't have this fully morphed. I think it gets a little bit stronger. Yeah, no increased duration, but it deals a little bit more damage once I get it morphed to rank 4 here, as you can see. But why is this ult so great? Well, number one, it's 200 ultimate, and you can build that quite quick on this build, so it's going to be a great oh shit button. If you have no resources left and you can pop Corrosive Armor, you pretty much just got a second wind and you're right back in the fight, and you can pretty much use that Corrosive Armor 11 seconds to almost build up your next Dragon Leap to continue to keep you in the fight. So it's a really strong ultimate for that reason, that if you've got nothing left and you pop it, it pretty much ensures that you're going to come back unless you're very low HP already. Secondarily, it strips your opponents of all physical resistance. This is a huge deal. I can't stress how huge a deal this is. So not only is it going to deal that dot around you when you activate it, it's going to cap incoming damage, but it's going to strip your opponent of physical resistance. This is going to make killing tanks very, very easy. All you do is you dot them up, Poison Injection, Venomous Claw, pop your Corrosive Armor, and then start beating on them with Heroic Slashes, throw a Draining Shot in for that stun, and just continue to smack them down. And tanks get hit so hard with your Corrosive Armor up. You just cut right through them like butter. I absolutely love it. I've loved this ability for taking down groups of players. You can quickly target and kill a tankier player when you have 3 players on you thanks to this ability. It allows you to maintain almost just full aggressiveness unless you have a lot of players on you. So very, very strong ultimate, and I think for this build it fits in really, really well, giving us access to that ultimate tank that we need, as well as a very, very powerful armor-piercing offense. Alright guys, so let's take a look at the champion tree. We're going to start in the green tree here, in the tower. 23 Warlord, 2 Sprinter. Gotta break free and you gotta sprint, ladies and gentlemen. In the Lover Tree, we've got 121 points, 64 Mooncalf, 22 Arcanist, 7 Healthy, and 27 in Tenacity. So we've got a stark focus on Mooncalf, of course, as we are a stamina-based build. 23 Arcanist, because we don't want to neglect our Magicka recovery either. And Tenacity, of course, because we are going to be using quite a few heavy attacks on this build, due to the fact that they're going to deal quite a lot of damage as well. And then 7 in Healthy, just for a little bit of health recovery also, just to kind of balance the points out here. Got to get that Wind Running passive, increase your movement speed by 2%, health and Magicka recovery by 10% when you're sprinting. Very, very good passive, I think. One of, if not the most important one from the green trees for combat. In the Shadow Tree, I have got 31 in Shadow Ward, 44 Tumbling, and 9 in Befoul. 31 Shadow Ward, 44 Tumbling, 9 Befoul. There you go. So kind of mixed between Tumbling and Shadow Ward here. We're going to do a lot of rolling. We're going to do a lot of blocking. As you can see in my gear traits, we favored roll dodge over the block as well, and we're going to do that in the champion tree as well. And the reason that we don't have a lot invested into block is because we're really only using that block to block critical attacks and proc the blind. Now, once the blind is procced, you don't need to block any attacks from that opponent anymore. You can just drop your block and start heavying attacking them, or even whatever offensive moves you want to use. You can do whatever you want. They're not going to do any damage to you once the blind has procced. So that's why we didn't focus too much on block cost reduction here, and we had more focus on the tumbling. And of course, we have a few points in Befoul just to increase the amount of heal debuff that our snipe will do as well. In the Apprentice tree, we've got nothing. In the Atronach, we've got 59 Master at Arms, 61 Physical Expert. Now, these are hilariously mismatched. It should be 59 Physical Expert and 61 Master at Arms. There we go. So, Master at Arms is going to give us 21% increased damage to all our direct damage attacks. So this is pretty much all your single target attacks, your bursty attacks and stuff like that. Physical Weapon Expert is going to buff all of our light and heavy attacks, which is very important. Like I said, this mixed with our Molten Armaments gives us almost a 70% increased damage on our light or on our heavy attacks. So very, very, very strong. The important passive we're getting here is Tactician. When you roll dodge an attack, you set the enemy off balance, and that pairs with the important passive from our Ritual Tree, Exploiter. Increase your damage against off balance opponents by 10%. So works very well. We're going to be rolling a lot. We're in medium armor. Awesome passives to have. Let's check out the rest. Before we carry on, Perfect Strike, also an important passive for that 12% weapon crit. So in this tree here, we've got 32 Mighty, 30 Piercing, 28 Precise Strikes, and 30 Thaumaturge. So a good, nice, even spread in the Ritual Tree. Honestly, I tried to keep it fairly even. And that's because we use a lot of different things. We're going to need all of this. We need the increased crit damage, we need the increased base damage, we need the increased penetration, and we need the increased dot damage. So, nice even spread here. A little bit of less focus on Thaum, but there you have it. Let's check out this Steed tree. We've got 61 Ironclad, 5 Spell Shield, 5 Medium Armor, 61 Resistant. This is a pretty standard Steed tree for a medium armor build, I think. Ironclad, of course, to reduce the incoming damage from the direct attacks. Resistant to increase your critical resistance by a huge amount. And then just a few points in here just to get those front-end heavy spell and physical resistance buffs. And then finally, we've got the Lady Tree, 15, 15, 16, Hardy for physical poison disease, Elemental Defender for the incoming elemental and magic attacks, and Thick Skin to reduce the damage we take from damage over time effects. Like I mentioned, you can use the Blessed Set to effectively negate the dots on you by causing them to miss. So the Thick Skin here is important, I think, because we're a DK and we don't actually have full access to dot removal. So we did have some points here in Thick Skin anyway. And then finally in the Lord Tree, we've got 43 Quick Recovery for that increased healing, and 9 in Expert Defender to reduce the incoming damage we take from light and heavy attacks. Okay guys, so let's jump into that PvP commentary. So the first clip here is just going to be a quick 1v2 showcasing how powerful the blinds can be. So as you can see here, we get this guy proc the blind off our block literally right away. He misses everything, his jabs, his Dawnbreaker, none of the outgoing damage. So we only end up taking damage from the Nightblade on the side, who we decide to make our target as we pop our corrosive armor here. And you can see just how little damage I take. I don't even have to heal, and I just focus the Nightblade down, and he takes so much dot damage after I dot him up. The Templar right away decides, oh man, this was maybe not the best idea, and decides to make a run for it. Maybe not a good idea. Here comes the leap. Good fight to those two. Good fight to those two. So let's move on to the next clip, guys. That was just a quick showcase of the blind. Let's show you guys a bit of 2vx here. A nice little outnumbered clips. This is me and Jordan. We run into a group of DC players on this resource, and the fight ensues. So as you can see here, I've got a lot of the focus on me, which is good. I am playing a tankier build than Jordan, so very good. We get an awesome little kite behind the tree into a leap to finish off one squishier player there, so it's really great. You see my very high wings uptime in this fight, and the reason I'm keeping those wings up, of course, is to prevent all that incoming range damage, because I know that there's a lot of the enemy players here, and me and Jordan are doing our best to synchronize targets. As you could see, he had pottled up a player there and started to put some burst into him. I turned to that target as well. Here you can see this player's going for a res. We already have another leap up, so we just leap right on top of him, prevent the res there. Get a nice little stun into that guy. Decide not to break this CC, as we don't need to. Thanks to the fact that Jordan's put in a lot of pressure on these guys, we actually managed to hit them pretty off guard here, so we put a lot of damage into them. I get stunned by that leap coming right out of my CC immunity. There you see I proc the blind from holding block for a little bit there, not taking any damage, but it's not like these guys are putting a too terribly much pressure on us anyway. This is kind of more of an offensive rotation on these guys than anything else. And we are down to the last player here. Jordan's got him pottled up. And I'm just kind of chasing him around, just being nice and slow, taking my time, not in a rush. Great fight with Jordan there. Very nice. But there you see how powerful the build can be against a group of players, especially if you can get a drop on them. So let's take a look at the last piece of footage. Not a lot of PvP footage for this build. Sorry, guys. As I didn't spend a huge amount of time playing on it, and I quickly, you know me, I quickly move on to other builds. But as you can see, that Nightblade went for the gank there, and we effectively blinded and blocked his Soul Assault, causing it to do no damage. Huge leap on that DK. That was over a 14k leap to bring that DK down. Somebody needs to invest in some critical resistance, at least just a little bit. You know, 0 is not enough here. So as you can see, the Sork here overextends a bit, tries to push into us, and my friends end up showing up, and we just quickly take him down here. Pretty tanky, but he ends up going down. And what we're going to do is push into this resource and try to hold off the ensuing DC hordes that are coming this way. So as you can see here, we've got a player in the distance. One of our players goes for a leap. I go for the leap as well. We quickly take that blue player down. And that's it. I noticed a Sork come in the back here. Now, this Sork, unfortunately, is fairly tanky, so it's going to take me a while to beat her down. But we're just going to put some focus in her. Of course, we're going to throw heroic slashes, too. Make sure we build a bit of ultimate. But right now, we're just kind of being patient. You can see a lot of DC coming over the hill. And it doesn't end. There's always more of them. From previous fights in this location during this time, there was lots of DC here. So we don't want to stray out too far because we don't want to get pulled in to the hordes of DC. And here they come. We've got a lot of guys starting to pile up on the side here. A lot of guys piling up by the trees. They're coming around the outside. I try to go for the leap on this guy for the kill. Unfortunately, he gets a healing ward from another player and ends up surviving the leap there. Maybe should have gone for the corrosive armor instead, been preserving a little bit more stamina. But the same player comes back. I stun him again real quick, just dot him up. Heroic slash, and he goes down. So very fast kill on that guy. And here we see the DK's weakness shining through. We put a lot of dots on this DK. He's having trouble dealing with them. He takes a dodge roll, and I leap onto his roll, and we take him down. And of course, the other player putting a bit of pressure into him as well. And then we're just kind of holding in here, just making sure to keep this place contained, using my draining shot right into both my dots. There you see that offensive combo. Even against a tankier player, it's going to do quite a decent amount of damage and start to put the pressure on them, and that's really what you want in these scenarios. But here comes the DC horde. They're going to start pouring in here, so we're going to have to be careful. I get the double roll up here. I do have no snare immunity going into it, and I don't have enough for the shuffle, so I decide just to kind of outlast the snares and try to sprint around the corner. It ends up working out. We start fighting a couple guys here. We managed to take down a Sork, actually, quite a lot of damage. I pop my corrosive armor, take down another player in my corrosive armor there, end up blowing all my stamina to do it, but we got the kill, so I would say totally worth. And come back around the corner here. They're starting to res their dead buddies. I block a few attacks, proc the blind, go into a leap, and down we go to the Zerg. So that is all for the build today, guys. I hope you enjoyed, and as always, feel free to hit that like and subscribe button.